everyone, and welcome back to the Corporate Innovation Stage at Web Summit. My name is Hattie, and it's my pleasure to be your MC for the afternoon. I want to get a bit of a sense before I kick off of who we have already here today. So if you can give me a bit of a wave, give me some energy, please. It's the last day of Web Summit. This is my fourth talk of the week. I need some energy. Waves are always already coming. I love it. Give me a wave if you are leading innovation in your company. So you're a chief innovation officer, head of innovation. Beautiful. We can be incredibly rude about them because they're not here. Oh, one. OK, we better be polite. Give me a wave if you're leading a business unit in your company and looking at how you can embed innovation in what you're doing. Few of us. Beautiful. And give me a wave if you are the feet on the ground, delivering the innovation, executing it on the ground in your corporate. Few of us. Beautiful. So I'm going to start today with something a little bit contentious. And I want to talk about a big problem I've been seeing in corporate innovation that may not be very popular for me to call out on the corporate innovation stage, but why not start punchy, right? And it's this us versus them mentality that I've seen developing over the years, where on one hand, we have the innovators in the company who inadvertently, or maybe even a little bit vertently sometimes, we put ourselves on a bit of a pedestal with a cool, sexy, fun function, right? We are the ones saving the company from irrelevance. And frankly, we are here to future-proof you so that there's still a company in a few years' time, right? We've all heard these kind of narratives. They're incredibly pervasive in corporate innovation. But what I've also observed over my years in this space is that we tend to promise a lot, but maybe we haven't quite delivered the level of wins needed to convince the rest of the organization that we're not actually just a little bit full of ourselves. So, my name is Hattie Willis, and my background started in corporate innovation. I've worked with huge OEM manufacturers, big logistics companies, banks, mining companies. I've worked on innovation in very different ways, from corporate startup pilots to designing and delivering internal accelerator programs, through to being in a venture studio, coming up and testing ventures for co-investment with corporates. So I've tested lots of different models over the years. And by the way, I'm not here on stage to tell you off for something I'm not guilty of myself. So in my old company, where I was an associate partner and a principal in our venture studio, when we created the venture studio, that was something new for our company. And we were the ones who were righting every wrong that had gone before us when it came to innovation. Never mind that the rest of the company were still delivering accelerator programs, and the things we were telling our corporate partners were very passé. And so we set ourselves up as the ones who were going to save our company. But turns out we were also doing something slightly new, slightly risky, definitely unproven. And so as we hit our own challenges and started to want a bit of support from our friends in the core, turns out there was a bit of love lost. And so I think this is something that I'm seeing, and when I speak, I caught up with a wonderful old client of ours in insurance the other day who we'd worked with in this venture studio. And I asked them how it had been going since I worked with them 3 years ago. And what they told me had been working is the basis for today's talk. So what I often see is this question, to spin out or to spin in. Do we do our scary big thinking outside of the core, or we do keep it all really close to the assets that we want to leverage? And the truth is, neither quite works. What we tend to see when we fully spin out is that we start to get too far from those assets to use them, and then we're just competing with startups who, frankly, weirdly, tend to have better access to capital than us. They can go to a VC and get quicker, more money than we can because the corporate wants to keep more control and equity. They're also incentivized differently. So if we have staff delivering these big innovations, they're on salaries, they're a bit safer, versus a founder for whom this is their only bet and they have deep skin in the game. So alone, it doesn't really work. Because I think the biggest thing that works for innovation is when we leverage our corporate unfair advantages. And these advantages can look like things like data, distribution channels, supply chain, infrastructure, things that startups can only dream of tapping into, that if we do it right, we have within arm's reach. The challenge with this version is how do we not get too distracted by what the core might want us to do, and how do we keep enough freedom to do the really scary stuff? Because I'm sure you will have heard before the analogy of a corporate immune system, right? Difference looks like risk, so it gets killed. And to be fair, if I was a business unit leader and my bonus, my future prospects depended on my ability to bring in and increase revenue, if you start taking chunks out of it for something that isn't even proven, I'm not going to take too kindly to it either. So a few things I think have to happen. Firstly, we have to realign incentives, and I'm afraid we've been talking about this for decades, and I've not seen much shift. To do this, we have to get much better at tracking what is actually being cannibalized by the core, and how can we link that back so that people who are giving up that cannibalization of their revenue streams are rewarded for it where it contributes to innovation efforts and directly feeds their incentives. But that's not enough. I think we also need a rebrand. We need to get a lot better at actively acknowledging the corporate's role and also our dependence on the core. We know that when profits start to dip, oh hello 2024, we start to see innovation budgets shrinking. We rely not just on those strategic resources, but also the money that fuels us and pays us. So I think we need to get much more humble at acknowledging the core is what's keeping us alive. Without you, we could not exist. Which leads me to two questions I think innovation functions need to get better at answering. Firstly, who needs to be an innovator? And secondly, how do we build organizational excitement for what we're doing? Firstly, I genuinely believe innovations can come from anyone in the business, but a 48-hour hackathon is not enough to surface them if there's no support after it. But equally, I know that if everyone was trying to be an innovator, things would break really fast. We need some people who are good at executing our core as well. Where it works is where innovation functions build real political capital. And by the way, I'm afraid to say, CEO buy-in is not what I'm talking about. That's table stakes. Okay? We need the CEO's buy-in, of course. But if we're relying on them to be our enforcer, to make other people let us innovate, frankly, we've all seen where that leads, to disappointment when people ultimately follow their emotional incentives. So what I want to put to you today is that in our pursuit of moonshots, we've been overlooking something important, the value of small wins. And these small wins are so important because not only do they build momentum, but they build trust. Now, this is not me telling you to take everyone who's working on Horizon 3 big disruptive ventures and make them work on innovating the core. Terrible idea. They need focus. But what we have to get better at doing is getting those Horizon 0 and Horizon 1 wins, and crucially, when we do, communicating them in a way that acknowledges the core's contribution and why we're doing this, because the core is part of those Horizon 3 efforts as well. So what is some low-hanging fruit? One of the complaints that I often hear from corporates and from friends with real jobs is that their new employees, let's call it out, Gen Z, are struggling for initiative. Now, whether we think this is fair or not, I'm hearing the complaint a lot. And so I started to look at this. What are the ingredients for initiative? The ability to spot problems and opportunities early, the ability to think of quick solutions to test, to solve those problems, the confidence to act in uncertainty, and the psychological safety to try and fail. Well, shockingly, those are 4 ingredients to innovation. So my thesis is we should be training all grads in initiative through these innovation skills, but without making it the cool thing, right? Innovation is as cool as core. Say it with me. Innovation is as cool as core. Yeah, that wasn't going to work. So I really think we need to start with some of this skills training. And I can hear you thinking, Hattie, you run a skills training business. Of course you're going to say that. And yes, I'd be an idiot not to on Web Summit stage. But I genuinely believe that the tactics of building cultural buy-in and trust are pivotal. So if you want to get started on this, I'm running a free webinar on skills for graduates, which you can send your grads to. You can come along and get a taster of what we can offer, and send it to your friends in corporate as well.